Well, hello, and lovely to have you join us again for another in our series on coping with COVID. And I'm delighted today to be able to have my friend Lynette Dean with us. She's a psychologist, and in her practice, she focuses particularly on women's mental health. I also think one of the most important things, if you don't mind me saying, Lynette, one of the most important things is that we were at school together, and you also are a member of our church. And I'm so grateful that you've taken time in what I know is a very busy season for you at the moment to just join us to talk about some mental health issues and coping with COVID. So I know that different people are experiencing this thing differently. And I wondered if you could just tell us a little bit of what you've seen out there. Like what is your experience as a psychologist? What's going on in our world in terms of, I suppose, particularly mental health? And welcome again.
Hi, Rowan. Thanks for the opportunity. I hope it will be meaningful to everybody. I think the overriding theme that I've seen, dealing with my clients during this time is that we're all experiencing grief symptoms. And it depends on who you are, where you are. Even though the types of losses we have are slightly different, we're all experiencing grieving symptoms. I don't know if you or any of the congregation are familiar with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and her stages of grief. Well, this is actually what we're experiencing right now. And I just maybe want to mention a few of the stages, and each person can identify maybe, their own like particular things that they're experiencing. But one of the first things that we experience when we experience grief, which is any trauma, the loss of a loved one, for example. But also what we're going through right now is one of shock. First of all, I think a lot of people can't believe that last year, this time, we weren't even thinking of a pandemic. And all of a sudden, here we are, fast forward 12 months down the line, and here we are. So there's that initial shock that, where did this come from? But then very often we go into a denial stage where it's like, oh, this virus won't affect me. No, it's not as bad as all that kind of thing. But I think when we start to read the stats or to listen to the news or actually know of people ourselves that have actually succumbed to the illness, then it very soon becomes real. And then I think, we often experience anger, which is the next part of grief. And that anger can be at different things. One of the big things is that, anger in what this, COVID has taken from people, angry at why are you making me stay at home? Why are you taking away my freedom? Those kinds of things. And then also extended to that, I've been finding a lot of people are actually angry at people out there who aren't towing the line, and we are doing everything the way we're doing it. We're wearing our masks, that kind of thing. And then we see people out there. And it's just a trigger when you just, speak to clients and they say, I get so angry because that person wasn't wearing a mask. Yeah. So that anger just happens.
And it's almost a disproportionate anger, I imagine. It's like it's unrelated, well, not unrelated, but it's disproportionate, yeah. Yeah.
Yes, it's actually almost like road rage, when you think people aren't obeying the laws of the land or the rules of the road. And how dare these people, not do what we're told, because it's because of them that we're still in this, so that it is completely disproportionate. Yeah. And then the next phase that happens when we're in a grieving process is a bargaining phase. And I've seen this quite a lot as well with my clients. They almost bargain with themselves, like, okay, if I social distance now for 2 weeks, then everything's going to be okay. And then the disappointment with that after 2 weeks that it's still there. And then we go back to the anger. So we've got to remember that these stages don't happen and just disappear. We can go backwards and forwards between anger and bargaining and denial throughout this time.
Right.
Which can be quite disconcerting because we could think, we're on top of this grieving process, and next thing we're back at anger, back at the person that's not wearing the mask, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then I think after the bargaining and the anger and all of that, I think there's that intense sadness. And that sadness can often be accompanied by depression. What I mean by sadness, and I often tell my clients that are going through a grieving process, you know, loss of a loved one, loss of a baby, is that what are they really sad about? You know, what is the sadness about? And as I say, here we see different groups of people having different things that they said that they've lost. For example, at the moment, I'm seeing a lot of grade 12s that are experiencing sadness at the loss of what should be their most important year of their school career.
Wow, hey, sure.
Their matric farewells, their 40 days celebrations. I mean, we think we just take those for granted, but a lot of girls had already got their dresses and had already had their nail appointments booked. And while we may think that's silly, for them, that is their reality. That is what they've lost. That intense sadness is there. It's that feeling of loss of control, you know, like how do we replace it? And unfortunately, a lot of the things you can't be replaced. Just on my own personal one, and I'm sure you also have your own, but my personal one would be that normally at this stage, my daughter and my son-in-law and my grandchildren are with me for 7 weeks. And now they're not here. And I'm angry about that. And I'm sad about that because you don't know when we're going to have that back again. And I think just in general, there's that sadness of loss of control, you know, which we actually have nothing that we can do about.
Yeah, and Lynette, we spoke about this, and we can't get too deeply into it, but I think when I phoned you to ask if you'd meet with us in this way, I was just saying one of my deep sadnesses, and I'm trying to even understand why it connects so deeply with me, but I agonize. I mean, I almost don't know what to do with myself when I think about it, and it's not affected me, especially in this way. But I just think about family who have someone, you know, family member dying in hospital, and going, you're not allowed to access them, or you can access them in a minimal way, or you know, you have to go for a hospital procedure where you might have visited your family member twice, or you have an elderly, you know, a parent or a spouse or whatever who's sitting in an old age home or a retirement center or a frail care, and you've got no access to them, and you just kind of go, there's a cruelty. It's the only word that I know. There's a cruelty to this that you know, even on news programs, you hear these stories of people dying alone and dying in the company of an iPad so that the family can at least try and be present. I just think it's horrendous, you know, it's terrible.
That is huge. You know, speaking of that, I think I mentioned to you as well, you know, a lot of the people that I actually deal with have been struggling to fall pregnant for years. And now they happen to find themselves pregnant in the middle of COVID-19. And that experience that they are having is the loss of what should be a wonderful time for them, because their husbands aren't allowed to go for scans, you know, with them. And the husbands aren't allowed to spend endless hours in the hospital once they've had the baby. They're allowed 2 hours and they've got to leave. So, you know, as I say, different groups experience different losses. And I think we need to be aware of that, you know, just because ours may seem like silly, it's actually not. It's a big thing for us. And I think particularly, Rowan, for your congregation as well. I mean, I know my mom's part of their congregation, and, you know, a lot of the elderly people, that trip every week into church is a huge thing for them, huge thing. And to have that taken away is also very cruel. It's a horrible, horrible thing for them.
And then neither of us are in fields, as it were, in which we typically experience or suggest quick fixes for. In both of our experience, we walk with people over quite long journeys. So I know there are no quick and simple solutions to this, but do you have anything that you would say in the midst of, we recognize the two things, we all experience this grief differently, and we all are jumping around Kubler-Ross's different stages in different ways. And so I know there's not one uniform answer, but do you have a sense of if I'm dealing with this almost subconscious anger or irritability or sadness, or is there anything that we can especially do that might be helpful?
Yeah, absolutely, Rowan. You know, I think as well, you know, when we get to that final stage often of grief, it's acceptance.
Yeah.
And I always tell my clients, just because we accept something doesn't mean we like it, all right? But it's about learning to live with it. And I think that's what we're talking about in COVID.
Right.
And I think what is important as well on a day-to-day basis, particularly during lockdown, is to try to maintain some form of routine, because that gives you some sense of control over a world that seems out of control.
Yeah.
So that kind of thing you can do. And also if you're finding yourself overwhelmed by what you are hearing, then also take control back by limiting what you listen to, and finding, one authority that you listen to. I know in the beginning of lockdown, I had the news on all the time, but it was horrible because it was this constant reminder of the storm we were in. So now I limit it to once a day, even if that.
Yeah.
So that kind of thing. And also don't deny how you're feeling. I think that's important. If you are feeling angry, acknowledge that it's the anger that you're feeling and why you're feeling angry. And it's okay to feel that way. Yeah. Because it's a part of that it's a normal part of that process.
Do you think acknowledging anger helps dissipate it? Or what does acknowledgement of anger do for us, do you think?
Well, I think if the anger controls you, then we know that there's a problem.
Right.
But if you can control your anger, so if you can understand that I'm angry towards this person that's not wearing their mask, for example, and then, just to take a deep breath and count to 10 and say, well, you know what, I'm doing what I can.
Yeah.
I think that dissipates it. Then you take control of the anger. It doesn't control you. You don't go and beat the person up.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I think if you are aware of it, just ask, what is it doing to you? Is it trying to control you, or can you control it?
Very helpful.
In some way?
And can I quickly ask you before because I know we've got short time, but just to say, in a similar fashion, if I'm struggling with a deep sadness and maybe even fringing onto a depression in the midst of this thing, is there, like you've suggested with the anger, because it sounds very simple, but like count to 10, that's helpful. Is there, when it comes to sadness, is there something that I can do, just practical, that I can hold onto or just help me just regain a degree of equilibrium? Is there something?
There is something, and and I think it is difficult, but I think in the midst of that, if you can just perhaps sometimes just focus on something good for the day, like some blessing that maybe you've experienced today that you didn't experience yesterday. Yeah. What I find is helpful for me, like when I'm feeling sad about this whole COVID thing, and it might be a little bit simplistic, but I look at the recovery rate every day.
Okay.
To see how many people have recovered from this in South Africa particularly, and I watch the percentage go up. Yeah. A little while ago we were only 49% recovery, and I think this morning we're 69% recovery. Yeah. And that makes me feel positive. That makes me feel hopeful. Yeah. And it may not work for everybody, but you got to find something that works, for you every day. Yeah. And look after yourself. Self-care is so important as well.
Yeah. Lynette, thank you for the gift of your time. The thing I don't like about these things that we've been doing is I could do this literally for 45 minutes or an hour. So I hate having to cut it short. But thank you for the gift. You've been a wonderful gift, wonderful insights and helpfulness, practical helpfulness. And thank you for the work that you're doing in our city and to be helpful to people who are in distress. And God bless you in these days. And thank you for the gift of your time.
Thank you very much. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.